All right, so we have a little background noise from the fishing boat leaving and the ocean behind us. See if that works. Welcome back to another episode of the Shortsighted podcast. Today we're talking to Nick, who's been wearing over -2 diopter glasses for the past 30 years. And since then he's found Endmyopia, and since then he's reversed all of his myopia. He can see better than 20/20 vision, or he has better than 20/20 vision, and the starting points of presbyopia, it looks like, have also been successfully prevented. Hope you enjoyed this episode with Nick. Here we go.
Remind me, where did you start out?
Actually, I grabbed my last prescription, and it was 3/26/2018, and OD. This is another thing about this. Why don't they just use right eye and left eye? OD/OS, just to confuse the crap out of you. Okay, so my OD was -2, OS -1.75, cylinder of -1.25 in both eyes, different places on the thing. They wanted to give me bifocals. I wasn't interested. So yeah.
And now today where are we at today?
I mean, I can see the 2015 line on the eye chart. In good natural light, I can see the 2015 line on the eye chart with some active focus, but without a great deal of trouble. Sometimes I can get down to the 2013 line, but you know, natural 20/20 vision. And the other thing is that partly I gauge this based on some of my coworkers. My coworkers are cool guys, and a lot of them never wore glasses. They're in their 30s, 40s, never wore glasses. And I'm like, okay, can you see that? Can you read that? And they're like, yeah, no. And so I'm gauging more against people who have natural good vision rather than what it was like when I was wearing -2s and I was massively overcorrected. And that's a different situation entirely. Like, you know, I don't think that I'm going to get to the point where a person who's overcorrected gets. I expect to get to the point where a person who has natural vision gets. I mean, at least that's what I'm hoping for.
And if somebody were to ask, oh, sorry. If somebody were to ask, so what were the main things that got you from where you started to where you're at currently? What would be your short summary of the steps?
Short summary is I first of all realized that it could be done. So number one, that was the first thing. And then I got a Snellen chart and figured out where I could read to and got myself a set of glasses that I thought were approximately right for that. The first set was a -125, both eyes. I did totally just forget about my astigmatism, but I don't know. It seemed to work out for me. But I wore those for, now I don't wear my glasses a lot of the time. I only really wear them when I need them. When I'm watching television, when I'm driving, or I used to wear them when I was watching television or driving, but I didn't wear them at other times. I definitely didn't wear them when I was reading. I definitely didn't wear them when I was doing close-up work. I never did that. But it turned out that those -125s were kind of even. Either my eyes adjusted to them immediately, or they were still a little bit too strong. And so the next thing I did was I went down, maybe I should have gone down quarter diopter, but I went down half to -7.5s, both eyes. And that was what really got me, because I could see the television or I could see, but I would have to work to get it. And so I wore those for about 2.5, 3 months. And I could tell my eyes were getting better because things like from the same distance, subtitles on the television were getting clearer and clearer and clearer and clearer. And eventually they were perfect. And so I knew that my eyes were improving. And around the time, I think about probably 3 or 4 weeks after I started this, I had a clear flash. It took me about a week to figure out what active focus looked like. and I had a clear flash, and I said to myself, well, okay, this means the mechanics of my eyes are fixable. Like maybe it was more than 3 weeks, maybe it was a couple of months after I started this. I had a real clear flash, like a 10-second clear flash. And to me, that's like, well, if I can see for 10 seconds, then my eyes aren't. It's not my eyes that need to get fixed now. It's my brain needs to remember to use them. And so it was like more of a question of just like waiting. What I do is every couple of hours I go outside and I stare at the mountains at my work. We're like close to some mountains, and I go outside into the backyard of my work and stare at the mountains for a few minutes and just make sure that and look at various things. And as time has gone by, that things have cleared and gotten clearer and clearer, and my I guess you could say my clear flashes have just become fully sustained. Like when I'm outside, I just see everything clearly, and there's none of that. You said one time that it felt to you towards the end as though there was something on your eyes and you kept blinking to try to get it to go away. That's what it felt like. And at some certain point, that just stopped happening. And I don't have that anymore. And now I can just see.
How long were you wearing?
Outside.
How long were you wearing? How long did you wear glasses before you figured this out?
30 years. 30 years. 30 years. Now, to be honest, to be fair, I was never a person who A, went to the optometrist very often, or B, wore my glasses except when I absolutely needed them. So my eyes weren't in the process of getting worse and worse and worse and worse all that time. I probably got a prescription when I was 15, and then a prescription for contacts a couple of years later. And then the only times when I was wearing them constantly was a couple of spaces of time, probably of about 4 years during that period, where I would wear contact lenses. So they were on all the time. If it was glasses, they were always coming off all the time. As soon as I got inside, take your glasses off. I don't have any need for them. You know, when you're fairly low myopia, you don't need them in the house, right? I mean, I could still tell which of my children is coming towards me. You know, it's not it's not that bad. But yeah, so I don't know if maybe that has some effect on things, that I wasn't allowing the process to really destroy my vision.
For sure.
I wasn't wearing them that much.
For sure. And can I ask, what are your other close-up habits? It seems like a lot of people really have problems with phone addictions and such. Otherwise, besides your work, what else do you do that's close-up or distance, or how does that look for you in general?
Well, okay, so yeah, I work close-up. What I do is I work at a place that we build drones, and I work.
Do they have guns on them? Are they drones?
No. Oh, these are camera drones, but we do sell them to the military, some of them. But no, I work on wiring harnesses, and also I do printed circuit boards. I populate and create printed circuit boards. If you've ever wanted to have a really solid ciliary spasm, look into a microscope for about 5 hours at a stretch. That is, you get a ciliary spasm that won't quit. But I don't do that very often. That's probably once every 3 months or something. I have a day where I'm really, in on a microscope on a printed circuit board. In terms of, I don't do social media at all. And I have a tablet that I use if I'm going to do something like, read the news. I'm a bit of a news junkie, but I'm not as addicted perhaps to my phone as some people are. Maybe that's
So what do you do in your spare time? And I'm just asking this not for specifics, but I like your distance vision habits, things that go on.
Distance vision habits. Well, I mean, I walk my dog when the weather is good here, which is in the winter as opposed to summer. We hike a lot. We spend time outside. But I will say that I do watch a fair amount of television, but the television's 12 feet away and I'm reading subtitles the whole time, I don't know that that's killing it. I mean, that's a good question for you. I mean, I want to say that it doesn't give me ciliary spasms, at least.
No.
You know, if I'm watching television from 15 feet away, I'm learning Spanish, so I spend some time watching Spanish television. So that is something I do in my spare time, but it's television's fairly far away.
Yeah, no, actually, when I spent the winter in Europe, and the way I got myself to keep my good vision is watch foreign films with subtitles. So
yeah, and
totally
well, also I love subtitles even when I'm watching something in English, because I like to know every single word that's being said. And I was a mechanic before I did this, and I do think I have a slight, tiny bit of hearing damage from being in that environment for all of that time. So sometimes, you know, people are speaking very low in a show, I don't quite pick it up, but if I've got the subtitles, it helps with that. So yeah, maybe it definitely doesn't seem to hurt. Like after I've watched a show for an hour, I don't see any worse than I saw before I started the show. At least I haven't noticed any problems with the vision since then.
So you don't spend much time on phones then, it sounds like, right?
I don't spend, I do, while I'm at work, I listen to things, but, you know, obviously that doesn't, you know, I've got my phone and a set of Bluetooth headphones, and I'm listening to, you know, either Spanish audio or some kind of news related thing, you know, documentary sounding podcasts or something like that. But, you know, I'm not on my phone constantly, like scrolling, looking, you know, typing out things. So no, the phone is not necessarily the same kind of addiction for me as some other people, I guess.
Yeah, and I was just asking these questions, kind of highlighting why a lot of times when people are having a hard time making progress and they're stuck and they can't figure it out, it's the phone addiction and they just don't have enough outdoor and distance vision time. So this was just kind of for me to make the point of like using subtitles and you're watching TV instead of Netflix on a tablet. Like that's just good habits. Hiking, being outside, great habits. And then not being glued to the phone, kind of all it takes, along with you were never wearing glasses when you didn't need them. So it's pretty simple, really, right?
Yeah, that made it. I mean, I think that made a difference for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've noticed that like this last bit has got some weird complications to it. I noticed that, for instance, at some point I figured out that a lot of the problem when I wasn't getting like feeling that clarity outside that I wanted was this eye, the right eye, had just decided not to join the party. You know, the left eye is like Mr. Reliable, but sometimes the right eye is like, I'm just going to let the left eye do all the work for a while and not focus. And so it's been like this sort of mental trick for me to convince this eye. And this is an interesting point, actually, because, you know, I used your thing to figure out which was my dominant eye. And my dominant eye is the one that sometimes decides to check out and not work, the right eye. And when it does decide to join the party and like work alongside his partner, that's when I can see really, really clearly. And so I've been kind of trying to figure out how to do that. And I've figured out this sort of mental trick, and it's helping. It's becoming kind of a natural habit to like kind of almost pretend that I'm only looking through the right eye. And it helps when I'm, for instance, driving. I'm sorry, if I were to be driving, keeping in mind that I always follow all of the requisite state and local regulations regarding moving vehicles, of course. But were I to be driving, I would have noticed that sometimes my right eye, and I'm guessing that's a visual cortex thing, just kind of just decides to be like, this is too much. I'm gonna like give up, kind of. It's sort of a lazy I guess it's a lazy eye situation, but it's very minor because even at its worst, it probably sees 20/40 or something like that. Even when it decides not to focus, it's probably 20/40. But this eye's doing pretty well. When I get them both working together, I can see really well. But it seems like it's mostly, at some point it gets to be just visual cortex stuff, right? I mean,
Yeah. Also still legal, by the way. 2040 is still legal.
2040 is still legal, but on my license it says I'm supposed to be wearing some sort of correction.
You could get that removed too. That might be a little part.
Yes, yeah. I could, but then I'd have to go. Yeah, no, I mean it'd be cool. I might do that eventually. Yeah. But
and just to gloat, how does that feel?
Oh my God!
From 30 years.
I said this to my girlfriend. It's crazy. I said this to my girlfriend the other day. It's like I wake up and I have contact lenses in. I can see everything. I wake up, I wander about, I can see everything. And it feels really good. I mean, the other side of that sword, of course, is that the other edge of that sword is that I wasted 30 years sort of blundering about in blur for no reason whatsoever. But, you know, I could have done this when I was 17 or 20 and not had to deal with all this. But of course, you know, didn't know it was possible.
And how did you how did you stumble into this thing?
Well, that's a story in itself, I guess. And partly, I was seriously, you know, I always hated the fact that I had to wear glasses. I mean, you know, in a sense, it made me feel vulnerable. Like, what if I lose my glasses? I won't be able to drive anywhere. I won't be able to, you know, in an emergency situation, whatever. I hated that. And I also thought it didn't make any sense because, like, if 30% of your, you know, tribe of hunter-gatherers on the savannah could only see as well as I could see, or even worse, we would all starve to death. And it just didn't, to me, that just didn't make any sense. How could that be the case? How could we have evolved with eyes that didn't work? That didn't make any sense to me. Anyway, I wanted to get years of dry eyes. And I know that's a massive side effect of LASIK, and I was like, if my eyes get any drier, they're going to dry up and blow away. Pardon me?
My internet cut out a little bit. I just moved the tethered phone to hopefully get a more better connection.
Oh. Yeah, I was just worried. I was definitely nervous that if I did LASIK, my eyes would get drier. And I kind of have figured out how to manage my condition to some degree. And I was worried that if they got me drier, it would be a real problem. And so I was nervous about LASIK for that reason. Some people at work had it and had good luck with it, but I was worried about the dry eye situation. And so I was like on the precipice of getting it, and then I didn't. And then I heard a talk on YouTube while it was about a guy who claimed he had fixed his eyes. And I said, well, and the way he described it, I mean, it made sense. Like, you know, it was a stimulus thing, and, you know, we were going to stimulate them to go in the back in the opposite direction to what, I guess it's emmetropization. Is that the right word? Am I using that correctly?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you just, you know, and so I started looking into it. I didn't just listen to that one TED talk or whatever it was and just go for it. I started looking into it, and I found your site and some of your rant videos, and some of your daily beards, and I looked into the science of it, and I was like, well, if they can do this to shrews and monkeys and chicks, I mean, our eyes don't function in a different way. I mean, maybe slightly differently. I mean, I'm not a bird, obviously, but it's clear to me that based on looking at the history of people I know who have glasses versus people who I know who don't, you know, and it's so much to do with their habits and so much to do with how they spent their childhood, essentially. If you spend your childhood reading in a dark room, you're almost definitely going to create ciliary spasms that are going to, you know, get you whisked off to the optometrist. That's the way it is. And that definitely happened to my kids. My oldest son has slightly, probably vision around where mine was at its worst. And my younger son has watched me fix my eyes, and it's like he was just on that early stage where they'd given him negative 0.75s or something. And he's like, okay, well, maybe I could just stop wearing them and get my distance vision and not, not fall into the trap of just getting worse and worse and worse. So I think
how's he doing with that?
Great. He only wears his glasses to drive now, and I actually gave him a pair that was even weaker than what he had negative 7.5s, which is not a lot. And then he was like, now these are feeling too strong. So I was like, here's a pair of negative 5s. And so that's what he's driving with now. And so, yeah, I think that he's probably going to save himself from years and years of glasses wearing, which is good. He's 18 now, 18.
Yeah, it's so important, I think. And that's why I love having these chats. And I'm so glad that you got up early. And I still feel bad about this right now. It's just hearing it straight from people, right? Because my crazy rants and stuff, that's one nutty person on the internet. Right. But following your story and hearing that it's actually fairly straightforward if you don't have a phone addiction, especially,
sure.
I hope it's helpful.
I couldn't, I hate to say it, I couldn't believe how easy it was. And I know that a lot of other people have a harder time, and it's not just their phone addiction. It's like, maybe it was because I never wore my glasses really or whatever, but it's been so far, fairly smooth process. I'm finding, little things towards just this last little, maybe 7% of getting back to full 20/20 is there's some little complications, like this one eye that doesn't want to wake up and, go to work. And then it's not the eye. I'm sure it's not the eye. I'm sure it's my visual cortex on whichever side controls the right eye. It's not the eye. And then night vision, which does seem like it's taking a bit of time. So I'm hoping that like in 2 or 3 months, I'll be able to say, yeah, I think I've got the night vision thing kind of like dialed in a bit. I'm doing your trick with looking at the digital clock. And actually last night I had a really effective, like I sat there for 10 minutes and I could hold those numbers solidly for that whole 10 minutes, which I had not been able to do before. Like I'd have a few seconds of like clarity and then it would just dissolve into a, sort of weird, I don't know, like several different versions of the numbers and stuff like that. And last night was really good. So I do that before I go to bed every night, which I don't know, seems to be working. Yeah, if you have any other tricks for night vision, you can let me know.
Some people do candles, and I'm not advocating this either way, but it seems, the movement of the flame for some reason, some people do. I'm not saying it's a consistent for everybody thing, but yeah.
Yeah, I definitely could do that. It's cheap. It's not an expensive thing. I was getting ready to spend $1,500 on each of my eyes, and they were going to slice into them with a laser. And I can see so clearly now, like it just drives me insane to think that this is a thing that people don't know about. Like, it seems like this should be an option for people. Like, if you don't want to do it, if you want to go get your eyes, sliced into, or if you want to wear glasses all the time, have at it, but surely it should be an option that like a sort of basically a course of some kind of physical therapy would essentially bring you back to where your eyes should have been in the first place. That should be an option that people get to choose. And it definitely isn't.
And you would have bifocals now if you listen to those people, and then you get used to those, and then you put those on, then you eventually can't read up close and you can't see at a distance, right? Like you end up in this situation where you're totally dependent. Yeah.
Right. Well, that's a lot of people of my generation. I'm nearly 50. And so, almost everyone I know has started to kind of go down into that realm of the progressive bifocals and all these different, and their glasses are getting more and more expensive. It's one thing when you have a pair of like, simple, -125 diopters or something like that. It's not expensive, but when you've got -8 with bifocals and progressive and all of that, it gets kind of pricey to get a pair of glasses, even if you take, especially if you go to the mall optometrists. Expensive.
Yeah, it's expensive and it's profitable, right? And that's how you get that whole narrative of, oh, you're almost 50, because I'm almost 50. And I got that story from people also, where you like, oh, you should start getting reading glasses. I'm like, I don't need reading glasses.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I do have some plus lenses that I use when I'm like, because I don't want to look like, sometimes when I'm doing printed circuit board stuff, this is very small stuff, it's a little easier for me to see what I'm doing if I wear my plus lenses. I got 0.1 plus 0.15s, no, plus 1.5s, plus 1.5s that I pop on to like do fine work sometimes. But I've noticed actually as my eyes have gotten better for distance, and I don't know why this makes any sense, but my close-up has gotten better. Like we have a set of drill bits at work with the size of the drill bit written on it, and 6 months ago I couldn't read them, and I would, I'd have to either go get my plus lenses or hand them to someone else and say, what does this say? And now I can read them. So I don't know why that would be the case, but it seems to be. My close-up vision has improved somewhat over this period of time.
Common story also, like the accommodation range seems to improve, so you being able to read up close better. I have not, and I always say this, in the last however close to 20 years now, I've not encountered anybody who's improved the eyesight by multiple diopters who ever needed reading glasses. Just nobody.
Super interesting. That's
nobody
super
ever.
Interesting.
Right.
I definitely do not need reading glasses to read a book, or, I mean, there's no discomfort. I'm definitely not doing that thing where, oh, it just turns out my arms aren't long enough. I don't know. I just do not have that. And, yeah, I mean, I should be rolling into that territory now, according to, the sort of conventional wisdom, and it definitely is not happening. So I would be happy if that never happened. But my dad never had glasses except reading glasses towards the end of his life. So, he had good vision, but he was an athlete. That was what he spent his childhood doing. My mother, terrible eyes, like extremely bad myopia. She spent her entire childhood cooped up inside of the book. And there's nothing wrong with reading. I'm absolutely not trying to claim that reading is bad. It's just, it definitely, without breaks and without some kind of, you can allow it to destroy your eyes for sure. And I think that's what I did. I spent my adolescent years, a lot of them, inside probably poor light, reading books.
Yeah, for sure. What would you tell other people that are maybe listening or watching this kind of thing and thinking about working on their eyes, but maybe not entirely on board or sure about what they're doing or stuck with progress? Any recommendations?
As far as I'm concerned, just I think if you can have that first clear flash, you can tell yourself, look, my eyes are fine. The mechanics of my eyes are okay. And you can get there. Like, I would assume that anyone who has like -2-ish could probably do what I did, which was some changing habits and some, I mean, a lot of my habit is that every 2 hours at least, I go outside and look at the mountains, and that's really not a bad thing, right? I mean, that's kind of nice for my mental health too. I go out and look at a mountain every 2 hours for 5 minutes. That's not a bad thing. And I don't know if maybe if I was on a phone all that time or in front of a computer all that time, it would be different, because I am, as you were saying, what I do for a living is much closer to building model airplanes or something. It's like a craft. But still, I mean, some little changes in habits that actually improve your life anyway, and your eyes can kind of snap back to where they naturally want to be. It's almost like an elastic band. They're just drawing back to where they should be if you give them the correct stimulus to do that. And I think that it just annoys me that it took 30 years for me to figure out this was possible. I mean, and also we have Zenni Optical and places like that where you can choose your own prescription, which you couldn't do before, right? I mean, 30 years ago, 25 years ago, 20 years ago, how would I have done this? How would I possibly have gotten myself a set of, less strong lenses? Most optometrists would have laughed me out of the shop. But I can go to Zenni and just decide what my prescription is for myself. And that is a tool that has definitely made it easier, and at a pretty reasonable price as well. Not to be a Zenni Optical ad, but
there
are other sites as well.
I think that'll pretty much do it. Are you engineering the drone apocalypse? Can I just ask you that?
I hope not, because that is definitely, although we had one of our clients was called Skynet, and I was like, you don't know what that means, but apparently they had somehow missed the memo that was like,
or maybe they didn't. Maybe that was part of the joke.
Maybe they knew what they were doing. I was like, Skynet, for certain, we're working with them. Didn't seem good. Yeah.
I'm afraid. You ever watch Black Mirror? That show?
Yeah. Yes. I feel like I think the United States is living through an episode of Black Mirror right now.
It probably is. There was an episode, and I'm going totally off the topic here because I think we covered all the things that matter.
For sure. Yeah.
The episode where the dogs, those dog-looking things.
Oh my God! Yeah. Yes, that is a terrifying episode. Yeah.
Whenever I hear
we don't
drones,
build any of those.
No, not yet. That's what I was going to ask. Just, did you have those in the warehouse somewhere already?
No. I have a regular dog that comes to work with me, actually. And during my little 2-hour breaks, he's playing ball. So his life is better. Every 2 hours, I take a 5-minute break and I throw the ball for the dog. I mean, everyone's life is better here. Where's the downside?
Wow, your drone contractor Skynet place is letting you bring the dog to work. That is amazing, though.
Well, I mean, we have this, it's funny. We have this sort of startup mentality, even though now we've kind of been gobbled up by a large corporation. But when we started, it was really, kind of a Silicon Valley startup type thing, although not in Silicon Valley, obviously. But so dogs allowed, there was a lot of freedom. There was a lot of kind of informality, and the dog has become kind of our mascot, and so he hangs out. Yeah. And so, I mean, and that's another thing is my coworkers are kind of, they have that everything can be hacked mentality, and so them seeing me working on my eyes is not even weird for them. they're the kind of people who have been trying various biohacks of various kinds for years. Young guys who are kind of influenced by some of that Silicon Valley biohack sort of stuff, which I don't necessarily buy into everything, but I'm sure there's something to some of it.
Yeah, and that's really what the theme should be. I should be much more progressive and cool and call all this biohacking, and we'd get way more people.
Yes, if you called it biohacking, you'd probably get a lot more viewership. But I mean, in a way, I don't know. I don't actually looked into biohacking much, but it seems to me that the idea of biohacking is kind of figure out what your body's naturally supposed to be doing, and then you can push it in a particular direction by using little tweaks or whatever. I mean, that's kind of what we're doing, right?
I mean, we're putting it back to where it's supposed to be. I'm really
That's
not.
it. Reset. It's a reset.
It's not that difficult, and I like your story because I'm certainly no genius wizard at any of these things. I'm just putting this very simple pieces back of just reduce the strain, put in the appropriate stimulus, and your eyes are doing what they're supposed to do. That's really it.
I listened to, I mean, I obviously was most influenced by what I saw from your site, but I obviously, as like everyone else, I've looked at a million things. And there was one guy who I didn't really buy into. He was very Batesy, but I didn't really buy into everything he said. But he did say one thing that kind of like resonated in a way with me. And he said, every cell in your body wants you to be able to see clearly. All you need to do is let it. And it's basically the point. Like, your brain wants to see clearly. It wants that. And if you just give it the right stimulus, it'll figure out how to get you back there. Yeah. But you have to give it the right stimulus. And it's like you said, ball rolling downhill. Once you get that moving, it'll happen. It's just, and I can't even believe how clearly I can see now. I was at the park the other day and I was like, I just can't believe that I can see 300 feet over there. I can see, exactly what those people are wearing. And like, I don't have super eyes, but I have like normal, in good light, I have normal 20/20 vision based on what other people are around me who have 20/20 vision are seeing. I can see the same stuff. That's 20/20 vision as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. And the positive news, the little bit of positive news on the 30 years wasted is you having figured this out is helping prevent, now you're not going to need glasses for close-up, right? Like you're avoiding, you didn't get the benefit up front for the last 30 years, but for the next 30 years, you're not going to be that guy who's where's my reading glasses to read close-up stuff. So it's still
I have a question for you, sort of more generally. What would you do if you had if your child was, a big reader and didn't tend to want to go outside much? How would you prevent myopia from starting? Because that's the whole trick, isn't it? If you don't get it to start when you're 13 through 17, it'll probably never start. It's a little bit like smoking. If you don't start between 13 and 18, you'll never start. How would you do that? What would you do? What would you put in place for a society that didn't want a whole bunch of myopes?
The distance, number one, is the distance, right? Like, kid doesn't need to be reading the book here. So creating a habit where the book is at a reasonable distance, because the closer it is, the more ciliary strain. Number one, so getting into a good distance habit. Number two, good ambient lighting. The better the lighting, the less strain on the eye. And number three, and I'm not recommending this for adults and in general, but for kids that don't have myopia yet, for reading, plus lenses.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
That'll largely do it. And then if you get them into some kind of outdoor hobby, some kind of thing that gets them a bit of distance vision, that should do it, as long as they're not getting addicted to a phone screen.
Yeah, an addiction to phone screen is obviously difficult.
Yeah,
I do find that I got a tablet for other reasons 2 years ago or something like that. And I find that, like, if I want to read the news or whatever, I find that much more comfortable than reading on a phone anyway. Like, I hate the way that it sets my neck when I'm trying to read on a phone or texting someone or something. A tablet feels more like a book in the sense that it's where it sits in terms of, your ergonomic distance. I definitely feel like that was a good choice, and it prevents a certain amount of that stuff.
The smaller the screen, the closer you hold it, because the immersion factor is like you're naturally going to hold the thing to where it fills that center part of your vision. So the smaller screen is, the closer you're going to get. The closer you get, the more spasm there is. So that's why I always say bigger screens are easier to hold at a larger distance.
Sure. Yeah. And I do feel fortunate, obviously, that I don't have to work on a computer all day long. I'm sure that would be, if I was a person who was on a computer all day long, I'm sure this whole process would have been more difficult.
Yeah.
I do have the close-up type work, but like, yeah, if I were a park ranger, this probably wouldn't have never happened to me in the first place, you know. But well, that's not true. I spent my entire childhood reading books, so. But there would have been less requirement for me to like take breaks and all that sort of thing if I'd been a park ranger.
Yeah.
But yeah, working on a computer all day must be hard to have the same level of progress, I would assume.
It's still fine as long as the rest of the time you're not spending in front of screens. The problem is people spend their time in front of a laptop and then or a computer screen, and then the rest of their time in front of a phone, and then it's kind of screwed.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. Yeah, I don't know. I have to say thank you very much. Your however many years of going to libraries and figuring all this out, it's definitely made it a whole lot easier. It was, you know, I don't know, probably a month worth of research. And the way that my mind works, I tend to deep dive into things. And so, you know, when I figured out I wanted to try this, I spent about a month, like, you know, just reading everything. I probably read 90% of your site, I would imagine, and listened to all of your Beardly rants. You know, and then I listened to some other people. Obviously, there are some Bates Method people. I wonder if Bates Method is kind of what would happen to you, what you would need if you never really had lens-induced myopia. It was just that you needed to retrain your visual cortex to see and get rid of strain. And maybe that would have been fine in the 19th century. Because I don't know what this long swing thing is all about, but is that partly a retraining of the visual cortex, or I don't know, I think maybe that works. I didn't really do any of it, but
it was for its time and for having very limited knowledge about the biology, intuitively speaking, it was a fantastic start. Like if that would have been the direction that optometry would have taken, then today that would not be a very big business. Yeah, the guy was a great start. Like I have nothing but the utmost respect for William Bates. The Bates method today is just people who don't understand, right? Like that was a thing for its time. Yeah, it's good.
You know what I don't like about it is it almost like they have this whole psychological aspect to it. Like, figure out when it was that you became myopic and realize what it was that you didn't want to see, and figure out what that trauma is, and you'll have this breakthrough, and then suddenly you'll be able to see clearly. And that, I think that's insulting. I mean,
that's not Bates method. That's not Bates
method.
No,
but that's not Bates method. But there's some Bates people out there who are really into this. You know, like it's a psychological blindness that you've created for yourself, and that just seems. I mean, I can tell you, I came to the United States when I was in my teen years, and I wasn't happy here, and so I retreated into books, and that's what screwed my eyes up. It wasn't that I was like traumatized; it was just like I was reading too much and not getting outside enough. Simple. Yeah. It's not a.
And that's one of the
Freudian.
That's one of the reasons I rant a fair amount, is because there's so much digging into these directions that are really not useful when the explanation is super simple, right? And it's just if you want to dig into your past traumas, fine, sure, nobody's going to stop you. But if you just want to fix your eyes, you don't necessarily need to go there. Right? Like,
also, I don't like the idea that, like, and some of these guys, there's a really nice gentleman, I won't say his name, and I've watched some of his videos, and he seems like a really nice guy, but it seems to me as though in order to follow his path, you have to be walking around in a state of pure Zen all the time in order to be able to see. That's not going to be me. Not in the United States in 2020. I'm not going to be able to walk around in a state of pure Zen all the time and be able to see everything because my mental strain is at a level 0. That's not happening. And I also don't think it's necessary. There's lots of stressed out people wandering around who can see just fine. So, I mean, mental strain obviously has some effect, but that's not the whole thing.
Anyway. Yeah, keeping it simple, Right, exactly what you did, and you're fine back, and you're fine, and whatever other things you want to attempt in your life, you can. But tying those requirements to improving your eyesight, I think, is kind of silly.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, sure, it would be great for us all to be a bit more zen, but I don't personally think that you have to be zen in order to be able to see well.
I'm always zen.
Lots of. Are you? Yeah. Well, there you. Well, that's great.
Right.
That's why you moved to Asia, to just like soak in the zen whatever.
That's how I grew this giant beard, and that's how the entire website is just zen-like in all of it.
Like, it's all about calm and nothing but calm.
It is, exactly. It's exactly.
Anyway,
all right,
I want to say thank you, and it's been an honor speaking with you. I feel like you've done good in the world, even if the whole world doesn't know about it yet. I have a feeling that at some point, and I hate to say it, probably long after you're dead, people will be like, oh, there's this amazing thing, and you can fix your eyes, and everyone's doing it, and it becomes a massive thing, and someone makes $1 million, and you'll be forgotten, and that sucks, because you're the one who did the work.
No, there'll be statues in the park.
Oh, I hope so. That would be good.
They'll be 8 foot tall, and there'll be claims on it that was my actual height. That's
yes, that should be. You should be on a horse for sure.
Yes, of course.
I mean, all heroes are on a horse, right? I mean, come on. Yeah, you definitely have improved my life for sure. And one last question: what are the chances that I'll suddenly wake up and regress right back to where I started?
Slim to none.
Okay.
You will notice, like, if you're doing the wrong things, you'll have a bad day, and you notice just in that day that your eyesight's not great. And if you continue doing that for the next month, then your eyesight will be noticeably worse. It's just like going on a diet, losing a bunch of weight. You're not going to wake up one morning with a bunch of weight back on. It's a gradual
it takes
flow.
a while.
Yeah.
Can I ask you one last question? Like, let's say you were a person with good eyes, like 20/20 natural vision, and you get a ciliary spasm. How much diopter would that generally be for a person with healthy eyes? They get a good, solid ciliary spasm. What's that look like?
I would guesstimate around a diopter. You might get.
Oh, okay.
You might see that.
That makes sense, actually. That makes sense because, for instance, my son, when he went in, probably had a ciliary spasm. He was 16, 17. When he went in there, he'd started reading more. And he went, and, they noticed that he was squinting at the board. And so, of course, he gets whisked to the optometrist's office. And what they give him is a -175 and -1 prescription. And so probably all they were noticing was this damn ciliary spasm. And if I'd taken him camping first, he'd have been fine.
Yeah, they would have still found something, right? Because they stick him in a dark room, and then they just say, is this better? Is this better? And in a lot of cases, a little bit of minus might seem slightly better, right? Possibly. Yeah. And so they're still going to,
especially if it's dark. Yeah, for sure. Well, just one last story. I took both my sons in to get their eyes checked because that's what you do as a good parent. And this was when our youngest son he wasn't reading much. He was maybe 14 or 15. And one of his eyes was at 20/20, needed 0 diopter, they said. And the other one was -0.25. And they said, oh yeah, you should get glasses. And I said, but he can see fine, and one of his eyes is 20/20. And they were like, and the woman at the optometrist shop tried to dad shame me and be like, well, a lot of parents think that it's important for their children to see very clearly so that they can do, so that in school they aren't at a disadvantage and that sort of thing. I was like, he can see 20/20, and but they tried to dad shame me into getting him glasses, which I think that's kind of immoral.
I'm not going to say a sales quota. Did somebody say sales quotas? No.
I mean, you're going to give him a pair of glasses with one clear screen and one with a tiny little bit of adjustment? What was that? And that was what they wanted to do, and I refused it at the time, but I definitely got a lot of flack for it from the optometrist.
Yeah,
it seemed kind of wrong. I mean, eventually his eyes like progressed to the point where they gave him a, I don't know, -1 or whatever, or he was in a stronger ciliary spasm at that point when they checked him that second time. But it just seems pretty screwy to like go for a little kid like that and like get him hooked on something. It's almost like,
so take him to a psychiatrist and see what happens.
yeah. Oh yeah. Nobody's gonna. Yeah. No psychiatrist is ever gonna say, "Oh, he's fine. He doesn't need any more sessions."
No. ADHD medication? No, of course not.
That scares me too. We are over medicating our children like crazy.
All right. Well, I really appreciate it, Nick, and again, and especially the 5 a.m. thing. That is just.
Oh no. That's not a big deal. Not a big deal. You have really improved my life. And if that means I get up an hour earlier one day in my life, very small price to pay.
And thanks for sharing also. I'm hoping that people will take this as a little bit of inspiration.
I swear to God, if you've got, -2 like I had or whatever, you can get rid of this in 6 months and live an easier life. I mean, it's not a huge difference in my life, but I enjoy being, if you're outside and you can see everything and you can read signs and you can, recognize people's faces and from far away. And it's just an improvement. It's a good improvement.
Yeah.
And it's not that hard to do I'm sure it's much more complicated it's definitely a longer process if you're at -8 or whatever, I'm sure. But this was not a big deal. And I think there's probably a lot of people out there with fairly low prescriptions that they could just deal with this and be back to normal with fairly little trouble.
All right, everybody, listen to Nick on this and work on your eyesight.
And that was Nick. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. Of course, digressions abound. I hope it's motivating. I hope it's helping you wherever you are at, starting out or already in your journey. And yeah, that's it for this one. Subscribe to a podcast if you haven't yet, and hopefully join us again soon in the next one.
Meow, 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 meow.